Hare Krishna. Hello guys, welcome back to our Brainy Voyage YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to discuss about loops in JavaScript. Generally, there are 7 different type of loops in JavaScript, which are for loop, while loop, do while loop, for in, for off, for each, and map. These are the 7 loops that are present in JavaScript. But in this video, we are just focusing on the basic loops, which are for, while, and do while. That's because the remaining 4 are way too advanced to discuss in this video, right? So I'm gonna make another video to explain remaining 4 loops. Okay, now let's just focus on how to use the loops and what is the purpose of using loops, right? So to answer my second question, I'm gonna take an example here, right? So let me just write the example. Okay, I'm gonna take an array with the name called arr, and I'm going to initialize some values here. Okay, I'm gonna take Krishna, Vasudeva, and age value to 20, and let us take some boolean values also, right? So if you watched my previous videos, I took the same examples to explain the arrays also, right? So I'm gonna just implement the methodology I am thinking of, right? So I'm going to console log the each value individually. I can do that by using this format, right? I have 4 values, right? So I'm gonna repeat this and replace the values here. Okay, so this will give me the output individually, right? So each value that are present in the array, that will be console logged individually, right? So if I just save the file, I will get Krishna Vasudeva 20 true in the console individually. Let's just save the file and check the result in the console. Okay, see, I got the result that I have been expecting, right? So it is easier if we have a little values, right? So I have just a 4 values, so I have written the console log statements, right? So what if I have hundreds of hundreds of columns that are related to arrays, right? So I need to console log each values individually, right? I cannot write all these values in the console log, right? So I can't just place 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 up to 100, right? So to optimize this kind of code, we use loops, right? So we can define the loops as loop will allow us to automate the repetitive task. It means that so here my repetitive task is to console log the value, right? But it has the some sequence, right? Here it is counting the values, right? So we are just incrementing the values within these square brackets, right? Here at initially it is 0, and in the next process it should be 1, right? So this is just an automation process, right? So we are just adding one value to the previous value, right? We can easily do that by adding the number by, right? So let's just so we can just do this operation using loops, so that we will reduce the time complexity, and also it will be much efficient to write the code. Okay, now I'm going to start the for loop here, right? So the basic syntax for the for loop will be as it will start with the for keyword, continues with the brackets, and in the bracket we have 3 fragments, like, right? So let me just write, so as I said, we should start the for loop with the for keyword, and we should continue it with the brackets, right? So in these brackets, as I said, there will be 3 fragments divided by 2 semicolons, right? So let me just add 2 semicolons, and after the closing of bracket, I should start my flower bracket. Then in this place, my block of code will be executed, right? This is my block of code, and this is just the basic syntax or structure for the for loop, right? So at initial fragment, which is here, right, I should initialize the value. That is the fragment use it for, right? The first fragment is used to initialize a value, right? So here I'm going to write an example to print the values that I have printed here, right? So I'm going to print the values from 0 to 3 in the console at first, so that I can just replace the arrays value to the array position values with the count here, right? So I'm going to initialize the value to count equals to 0, right? So why I have taken 0 here mean that I need to start my for loop by considering the count value to 0, right? So at the each iteration the count value will be changed based on our condition here, right? So based on the condition and iteration, the for loop will execute as many times as the condition satisfies, right? So at the first fragment we have written the initialization, right? In the second fragment we should write a condition, right? Here my condition should be less than or equals to 3, or I can just simply write a less than 4, but you will get a little bit confused, right? So I'm gonna take a count value less than or equals to 3, right? So it is going to take the values from 0 to 3 and it will satisfies the condition. Yeah, and if it satisfies the condition, the block of code will be executed. If it doesn't, then the loop will be exited, right? So at the third stage, I said we need to increment or decrement the value. But in here, our condition is to increment the value, right? If we decrement, this condition will never satisfy, right? So always the values comes into the negative values. So the count value will always be negative. So this condition will always be true. So that we will raise and bug, and so that is not what we are expecting, right? So I'm gonna increment the value here, right? Count equals to count plus 1, right? If you remember in our previous video, it is just like if we want to increment the value by 1, we can just replace this with the 2 plus symbols, right? So it is just like post incrementation, right? So whatever the value that we have taken, it will be added by the 1 after using it, right? So potentially it is going to be 0, and whenever this block of code executed, it will comes under 1. This is how the incrementation works, right? Now here my block of code is to console log the values, right? So I'm going to console log the value so that I can get a 0 1 2 3 in the console. Okay, see, I got 0 1 2 3 in the console as I have been expecting, right? So I'm gonna explain the loop how it is started, right? So at this process, which is this first fragment, I have initialized the count variable, right? So after checking the first value, I mean, it is just going to grab the values that we have initialized in the initialization fragment, right? It is not going to perform any kind of operation, just but taking the value, right? So in the second case, after executing the first fragment, it will automatically move to the second fragment, right? So the second fragment will be the condition here, right? This is the condition, right? If the condition satisfies, then it will directly enter into this block, right? If it doesn't satisfies, it automatically breaks the entire loop, right? So it will stop executing the entire loop and it will move on to the next case, right? But in here we don't have any next cases, right? So it won't perform any other operations, right? First iteration I got 0 in the console, right? So here I got 0 in the console, and in the next iteration, right? So the block of code has been executed, so that this will terminate here and it will move on to this third fragment here, right? So in the third fragment I have written one thing, which is to increase the count value by 1, right? So it will automatically increase the count value to 1, right? So now here the count value will be 1, right? Now here also the count value will be changed to 1, right? Because this value what we have initialized, that will be considered as the updated value in the second fragment, right? So this is going to be replaced with 1, right? Now this fragment has been satisfied, right? So this block of code will be executed and it is going to replace the count value to 2 until this process has the greater value, which is 4. If it has the 4, then this block of code is never satisfied, right? So if I just save the file, I don't see any values in the console. That's because my condition has been false here, right? So 4 is never less than or equals to 3, so the for loop has been exited here, right? So this is how we just write the for loop, and this is how the implementation of for loop works, right? Now all I need to do is replace this count value in this format, right? So here I have 0 1 2 3, right? So in place of 0 1 2 3, I can just pass the variable that I have taken, right? So let me just replace this value to 0, and I'm going to pass the values with the count, right? So if I just save the file, I will see the exact results that we have got here, right? Let me just save the file. Sorry, here I should save the file. See, I got the same exact results that we got in here, right? So here, if you can see the page line numbers, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, right? This is what the numbers of 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you can see that we got for these four, we console logged at the 13th line here, right? Which is this. Right now, within by taking in one line, we have console log the four values, right? Without repeating the values, we have console log the four values. This is the purpose of using the for loop, right? So we automated the process just by initializing the for loop, right? So okay, I think you got the rough idea about working of this for loop, right? Let me just get into some deeper here. Okay, I'm going to comment this out and explain the for loop only, but in different scenario, right? So I'm going to take the count value to 0, right? At first I got the count value to 0, and I'm going to write the for loop condition here, which is 2 semicolons. So it will divide it into the 3 fragments, right? Now I'm going to write my block of code, which is console.log of and array of count value, right? So if I just save the file, it will be an infinite loop, right? Because I didn't initialize the condition here, right? So it will never be false, so that it will automatically be true and I will get the infinite loop, right? I don't want to do that also, right? I have taken the first fragment, right? I have initialized this first fragment outside of the for loop, right? And I have now, okay, now I need to move to the second fragment, which is the condition part, right? So if I just write the condition, which is if condition, if is also a condition, right? We can also perform the computations in the if conditions, right? Let me just write my condition here. Okay, count value less than or equals to 3. This is my if condition, right? If my condition satisfies, this block of code will be executed, right? If I just save the file, it will again run into the infinite loop because I didn't write the break condition here, right? So I didn't tell the JavaScript to stop the procedure if it doesn't satisfies the condition, right? So it is going to print the values if it is satisfied this under this condition, right? But what if it doesn't satisfies, right? I haven't written the else block here, right? So it is never going to stop the procedure, or it is never going to end it, right? So it will be an infinite loop, but we didn't see any values in the console. We just see only 4 values, but it is going to be an infinite loop, and our browser will crash automatically, right? I don't want to do that, so I'm going to write the else block here, right? Else break, right? And we also have one more thing that we need to initialize the count incrementation, right? So if I didn't increment, this condition will never be false. That's because my count value initially is 0. So the 0 will always be less than or equals to 3, right? So it will always be going to be true, and I will get this block continuously, right? But I'm going to print only one value in this case, right? Because I didn't increment the position, so my count value will never be changed, right? So the whatever the value I have taken here, which is 0, and it will automatically computes the value at the 0th array index, right? Here the value will be Krishna, so the Krishna will be printed n number of times until the browser crashes. Okay, let me just write the count value to perform the operation perfectly, right? If I just save the file, I will see the same results, which are Krishna, Vasudeva, 20 and true in the console, right? Let me just save the file. See, we got same result in the console at the line number 20, right? This is the our line number 20. So we got Krishna, Vasudeva, 20 true in the console, right? So why we are using all these values in the one fragment mean that, so at first stage we will be initialized, right? Here the semicolon represents the end of the line here, right? So my fragment will be closed, right? it is just like writing in this format, right? Count equals to 0, count less than or equals to 3, and here will comes the incrementation, right? Just write it here. Okay, count plus plus. This is how we write the end of the lines, right? So this is how it is going to be, right? We have separated the each line with the semicolon, so it will represents the end of the line, right? It is the same exact way of writing the count value outside, and instead of writing the if condition, we have written this condition so that we don't need to write the else condition. So right, so what if it doesn't satisfies, the for loop will automatically exits, right? We don't need to initialize the break condition here, right? And after the execution of the block, then this third fragment will be executed, which is this one, right? This piece of code, right? So this is how the for loop works. Okay, I think you got an rough idea about the functionality and structure of for loop, right? So let us just move on to the while loop and do while loop, right? Okay, I will just write the condition, right? So I will start with the while keyword, and it will also continues with the brackets here, right? In between the brackets, I'm going to write the condition only, right? I'm gonna take only the condition. Let me just uncomment the count value here, right? So I don't want to repeat all the time all the things again and again, right? So here my condition will be count less than or equals to 3, right? If this condition satisfies, it is just like writing the if condition, right? We in if condition, we will write in place of while, we will write if condition, right? But the if condition will works only once if it is outside of the loop, but the while condition is an loop, right? So this is going to be executed until this condition has been false, right? So instead of writing the for loop, we can also write while loop, right? Okay, now as I said, we need to print the values from 0 to 3, right? We have initialized the value here. Let me just bring it down. Okay, now we need to print the count value, right? Console.log array of count. Okay, this is going to give me the count value 0. It is going to give me the count value of 0 only, right? Because we didn't increment the order, so it is going to be an infinite loop, right? You should definitely remember that we should initialize, we should write the condition, we should increment the condition. Okay, so here I need to increment, right? So I'm going to write count plus plus, right? This is going to be this is going to give me the same results that we have been expecting, right? See, I got the same result, Krishna Vasudeva 20 true in the console in the line number 33, which is this, right? But this do while loop is a bit different than the while loop. The functionality of them are a slight different, right? So let me just take an example also so that you will get to know what is the difference between while and do while, right? I'm going to comment these console log values. I'm going to keep these three going to keep this while condition here, right? Now I'm going to write the do while loop here, right? So the do will never have the condition, it will just have the block of code that needs to be executed, right? So we are not passing any brackets, we are just opening the flower braces here, right? I mean, we are not writing any condition for the do, we will write the condition in while, right? This is just like doing the work. If it satisfies, we will continue doing the work. If it is not satisfied, we will stop. At first, whatever the task, if it is satisfied or not, in the first iteration, we are going to do the work, right? Okay, so let me just take an example so that you will get to know what I mean, right? So I'm going to take the same example that I have written in the while, right? Now, at the end of the do, I need to write the while condition, right? It is just like writing if else block, right? But we cannot stop it with the do, so that we should always write the while condition if we write do, right? So it is just like a condition to stop the loop, right? So we cannot end up in infinite loop. Okay, so I'm going to write the while condition, which is count less than or equals to 3, right? This will be my while condition. If I just save the file, here the count value is initially set to 0, right? Now my block of code, which is this, at initial stage it is going to be 0, so I got Krishna, and in the next process it is always going to be satisfied, right? And so the while block will be satisfied here, right? Let me just make it a easier way. Okay, here at initially my count value is 0, right? So it is, no matter what we have written in this condition, it is never going to be checked, right? It is always going to perform the do operation first, right? So here my count value will be 0, so that I will get Krishna in the console. I have repeated it in 3 times. That is not at all problem. I'm just explaining it, right? So let me just replace it. Here the count value will be automatically incremented, right? So here the value will becomes 1, and after execution completion, right, I mean after the first iteration, it is going to check this condition, right? Okay, here at now it will be 1, right? So 1 is less than or equals to 3. It is never going to check the value 0 in this condition, right? So if it is 0 or 1, after the first iteration only it is going to check the condition, right? I will show you that also. Just understand this functionality of do while, right? So it is just going to be 1 less than or equals to 3, right? The condition has been satisfied, so my do block will execute again, right? At this condition, my my count value will be 1, so that I got Vasudeva in the second statement, right? It is going to be repeated until this while condition will become negative, right? So as I said, it is going to do the work at first, and it will going to be checked the condition again after the completion of first iteration, right? So let me just make this condition false. Okay, I'm going to replace this with the count value is less than, greater than 3. Here at initially my count value is 0, right? So this block of code will never be checked at the first iteration. So I will get Krishna in the console at first, and the remaining 3 values will never be computed. That's because this while condition will be false, right? So if I just save the file, I will get only one value, which is Krishna in the console. See, I got. As I said, the do block will execute first, no matter what we have written in the while condition, right? So it is just like we will do the work. If it satisfies by doing the work, we will continue. If we not, then we will stop the work. This is how we write 3 basic loops, which are for, while, and do while in JavaScript, right? So we will meet up in another video by discussing other 4 loops. Thank you for watching. We will meet up with another video. Hare Krishna.